Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Andrew Marino, and on behalf of Carasoft Technology Corporation, I would like to welcome you to our Hyporion Scoop Cyber webinar, our SLED organizations ready for zero trust mobility. With that, I'd like to hand it over to the first presenter today, Stephen Cooperman, President, Scoop Cyber.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Carasoft and Hypori, for co-hosting this. We're coming to you live from the new Carasoft studio here in Reston, Virginia. So really great format for engaging in formal discussions. So I think everybody attending will get a lot out of this. So just a little bit about Scoop Cyber. We're a value-added reseller focused on emerging cyber and disruptive solutions, a strong Carasoft partner, and a strong Hypori partner. So, when we looked at the first slide that was up and Hypori's tagline, one device, zero worries. And that's really a vision that they have that you're going to learn about today, how that could be reality. But today, we don't have one device with zero worries. We don't want work stuff on our phone, and our work doesn't want our personal stuff. And that's why we see everybody walking around with 2 or 3 devices, or, oh my God, I did this on my phone. There's no, separation. And we're going to learn today how that's possible to have one device accessing your corporate networks, your government networks, your secure networks, and your personal phone all within one environment. So really exciting. So clearly we live in a world where the lines between our professional life and personal life are blurred. We work from anywhere, although I think Trump wants to get everybody back to work, but we still will be working on our mobile devices. And how do we deploy secure zero trust mobility on an enterprise scale? And that's what we're going to delve into today. So we're going to discuss solutions for organizations looking to implement zero trust, which is a mandate or a desire for every organization to reach. And our biggest exposure is at the edge in mobility, but probably the most important. So as we think about our zero trust architecture and how we're going to comply with mandates, this is going to be key to what you're trying to accomplish. So really exciting stuff. You're going to see the simplicity and elegant solution and how they've developed this. And we've put together a real expert panel, and we'll be taking questions as we go that we'll answer at the end, or questions at the end. But I encourage everybody to take advantage of everybody that's here. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel and have each person just spend a second introducing themselves and their organization, and then we'll get into some Q&A and some discussion. So I'm going to start out with the CEO of Hypori, Jared Shepard. So over to you, Jared.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. So I'm Jared Shepard. I'm the CEO of Hypori. This is my second company. I spun it out of my first company, Intelligent Waves. Farther back than I used to be an old Knuckle Dragon Army guy that spent a lot of time focused on mission, and that's kind of the genesis of Hypori, was the idea of how can we both accomplish, a security platform that protects against, either nation-state actors or criminal organizations, et cetera, but really, how do we protect enterprise against the edge device? And then what kind of became the secondary piece in of our focus is how do we also protect employees from overreach of the enterprise, right? And those two things being mated together is what is Hypori. So I'm glad to be here today.
Great, fantastic. To my left is Matt Pickett, who's CTO of Scoop Cyber. So Matt, over to you, a little bit about your background.
Large background in cybersecurity architecture, and in the last couple of years, helping to identify next generation tools that are kind of new to market and have like a very good niche point. One being Hypori. I think it's a great tool. With my years of experience, it's something that I have not seen, and something that I think is very beneficial to a lot of different organizations, both commercial, SLED, federal, any which way you want to, deploy it. I think it's very beneficial and helpful. So happy to be here.
Great. Let's get right into our discussion. I'm going to start out with you, Jared. And, the context, again, is mobility, secure mobility, and SLED. Maybe just some of your observations of what you're seeing and really why, you think this is the topic we should be discussing today.
Well, I think we've seen a lot of things change. For SLED, in a lot of ways, SLED doesn't have the same resources as the Fed does. State, local, county governments are challenged with the same type of problem sets that big federal is, that Michael and I are used to trying to address and help big federal governments with. But the attack surface is really what's evolved over the last 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 years. We're now at a point where 60-something% of all internet traffic is generated by an edge device. People spend hours of day on average on a mobile device. Mobile devices are the least integrated platform to enterprise security architectures. And so while they present the largest risk factor and the largest attack surface, they're also the most difficult to defend just because of the variety of devices that are out there. And the traditional methodologies of defense generally require some level of control. And so then we have this other evolution of challenge that's occurred out there, which is the privacy aspects of this is, the Fed or SLED or even local corporations that are concerned about like CMMC compliance or other things like that. The idea of having to buy a completely separate, physical infrastructure for your employees to interact with your organization is limiting. It's challenging. So as we continue to employ and develop and hopefully deploy the zero trust architectures, depending on which one you believe in, seven pillars or 11 pillars, or which aspect of those. Edge is one of those big aspects of the zero trust architecture, and that's kind of what we're focused on. Hypori being a virtual secure mobile platform. We have partnered with ISEC 7 in the past and used ISEC 7. They both have a great data management when it comes to data classification tools inside of their emails, which is great inside of our operating system. They also have an MDM capability for security management. So there is no one solution. And I think that's one of the problems that everybody faces, and a lot. Any of the folks that are watching us that are from the SLED side of the house, I think they want the easy button, right? They want to go to a vendor that says, "Can you make me zero trust?" And there is no one way to do that. I don't think. We address one piece of that, but I think there's also a lot of other people out there that address other pieces of it too.
Great. Part of zero trust is just needing to do it. The other part is, compliance. Matt, you want to address maybe how this could help with some compliance issues?
Yeah. So I think a lot of different organizations, whether it's federal, commercial, they all follow different frameworks. You have governance, you have compliance standards, you have NIST 853, whether you're on version 4, version 5. Using Hypori allows different organizations to leverage whatever policies or requirements that they deem fit to put in this cloud environment to secure the end user. Whereas if someone just has their regular iPhone and they download your Teams, your OneDrive, it's hard to regulate all that data. What they have, you can put in different controls through Teams, through Outlook, to where you can't copy and paste organization data. But what about screen captures? Sometimes that's not, adequately monitored. But with Hypori, there's a lot of different security features, a lot of different ways that you can, protect your data, your company data, whether that's Fed, SLED, commercial, and, map it to different compliance standards. And there's a lot of, it's a lot easier to monitor and maintain through one single pane of glass, via Hypori's cloud engine. Whereas if I have Teams on my phone and you have, 1,000-person organization, it's kind of hard to monitor, what that person is doing with their device. Also, if that person's device gets taken, stolen, they still have access to all that data. Whereas if it's a Hypori engine, you can just take that person's access away. So they can buy a new phone, download it again, or if they have an iPad, they have a laptop, they can spin up their image on that. I think that whole, operating system is a lot better and a lot more adherent and easier for an organization to accept, but two, me to accept, where I don't have to accept all these different criterias where I'd be scared that X organization can have the ability to wipe all my personal data. If your phone gets stolen and your company says, well, we need to wipe that phone because our company's data is on there, you have to allow them to do that. And you have kids' pictures, family pictures, a lot of, things that might be near and dear to your heart. Whereas if you have a Hypori image, you don't necessarily have to adhere to those same type of requirements because an end person, a Hypori engineer, or someone trained up in your organization can just disconnect. And that's a lot safer and a lot easier for me as an end user to accept, and also a lot easier as a organization to feel comfortable giving someone access to their data using Hypori.
Well, I mean, the reason why the reason why Hypori took that approach, right, which I know Michael can talk to this, and I think there are other people out there that can talk a lot about the strengths and weaknesses of endpoint management and endpoint defense versus preventing data in transit and data at rest. And the reason why Hypori exists is because we wanted to specifically address the challenge of data in transit and data at rest. And the reason for that is because there's all these new precedences and all these new mechanisms that have occurred in industry and government, et cetera, that needed to be addressed. And it's, in some ways, it's kind of entertaining that it's this cyclical evolution of technology, and that, remember the old days of mainframes and dumb terminals. Well, in some ways, what Hypori has essentially been able to do is make it so that any edge device can be a dumb terminal. But the strength of that is twofold. One is that edge device no longer has to be managed, which if you look at like CMMC, for instance, or you look at CISA's guidance, the idea of an auditable attack surface from a regulatory standpoint, whether it's NIST or whether it's CMMC or anything else like that, that any surface that stores corporate or government sensitive data set is a part of the auditable surface. But they specifically call out that virtualized instances do not require that the physical device accessing the virtualized instance need to be a part of the auditable surface. So we significantly reduce the not just the attack surface, but the managed surface, right? The part that you inherit liability from, the part that you inherit risk from. We significantly, have the ability to reduce that, and that addresses, like, let's talk at the high level, like not just Hypori specific, but across SLED, across federal, et cetera. Like we used to have all these different classifications of data, FOUO, law enforcement sensitive, LES data. You name the classification. Now it's all pretty much called CUI, right? And the federal government has CUI data set requirements across the board. Well, one of the interesting things that's come out was the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, which is, it's also the FAR guidance. If you guys want to geek out and I would like get to know all the different regs, we can share that. But what it really comes down to is they banned TikTok. Well, why did we ban TikTok? Well, TikTok is an aggressive nation state platform, right? And people always go, oh, well, it's the same as Instagram. Well, except for the fact, hopefully, Mark Zuckerberg is not actually trying to exploit the United States of America and achieve national outcomes for another country. I don't believe that's the case. I know that China is, right? And that TikTok is a platform in which they had the ability to influence and control, whether it was psychological operations or data collection operations or influencing operations, et cetera. So they banned TikTok. Well, the TikTok ban specifically states that anywhere that CUI data or uncontrolled classified data or anything that's considered nationally sensitive data is either stored or processed cannot coexist with a device that has the ability to access TikTok or any ByteDance application. And so when you think about like, okay, well, I'm going to try to accomplish that through MDM, you could, but that will mean that you're going to have root level control of the device. So how many of your employees want you to have root level control of their device?
Exactly.
And report all the applications that are on their device and report any website that they ever go to that has malware on it. Ironically, most of them don't. Right. And privacy has become this more and more important thing over time. And then on the flip side is you have court precedents. There's now building court precedents to include at the circuit court level now that says if you allow an employee to have data on a personal device, it is the corporation that takes the risk, not the employee. And so all these things are coming together to this perfect storm of you're either going to have to buy your employees dedicated separate infrastructure, or you're going to have to use a platform like what we are.
Yeah. And I think what you guys have provided is a much more valuable or valid option rather than the cost associations to another device. And honestly, it's a lot, like I said, it's a lot easier for me to accept an image, downloading an app very easily, and it's very easy to access. It's very easy to stand up, and I'm sure you'll demo it, on your phone here shortly. But being able to do that is a lot easier than me allowing someone to wipe my phone, which is I have memories, data on there that I might not feel comfortable, giving up in the case of.
We've even seen cases of bad guy actors now. We saw this out of New York originally, and now it's been seen out on the West Coast as well. But what they'll do is they'll distract you. They take your phone from you, right? And of course, assume you're a diligent employee. You recognize it within minutes that your phone has been stolen.
Yep.
You report it to your administrator. Your administrator goes into name the MDM,
Yep.
and it says brick the phone.
Yep.
Right? This phone has been lost, brick the phone. Well, the challenge is what bad guys do now is they drop it into a Faraday bag. So they take it off net, they drop it into a Faraday bag so it has no connectivity to the network. They walk it over to a replicator, which are now you can put in a box about this big.
Oh, wow.
They fully replicate the device, and then they dump it out of the Faraday bag in the open. And so then what happens is the MDM then connects to it and bricks the device and reports back to the enterprise, hey,
It's been
all your
bricked.
data is safe. All your data is
Oh,
safe.
wow.
But now they have a full replication of your entire device.
Right.
So, like, the idea of that, the old school idea that is a sufficient methodology of security is
It just
kind of
doesn't,
antiquated.
just doesn't work. It's not viable.
Not anymore. The bad guys have evolved.
Right.
So I think this is a good segue to the privacy issue. I'll hand it back over to you, Jared, and then Michael, I'd like you to jump in as well after. So how do organizations and citizen privacy concerns differ? And how can SLED organizations ensure they're safeguarding both without compromising security?
Sure. You want me or Michael? You want to do
I
it?
want you, and then I'm going to ask Michael.
Okay.
to
And I
jump in.
think Michael's insight would be really interesting because they're also an international company. They do a lot of stuff in Europe too, and Europe has this whole what's called GDPR, which is a big privacy, a privacy initiative inside of Europe that we have states in America that are now adopting essentially almost copy, copy paste, California, Oregon, others. But the idea, and this is, if you see our tagline, one device, zero worries. The idea is that your phone is yours, right? And the data that's on your phone is yours. And there's actually some court precedents out there that says that the data that's on the phone is yours. So, but I don't want to have to buy my employees a separate phone. But my employees have a right to have privacy and to be able to do whatever they want to do on the device that they pay for and that they possess. So what's the perfect middle ground, right? Well, ironically, it's zero trust. It's the idea that you must assume that the edge device is already compromised, because it probably is,
Yeah.
right? They probably have TikTok on there, or they probably have name the social media application that's bleeding data off of it and selling the data, right? Whether that's compromised by a nation state or just by a vendor who's trying to make money, the device is losing data, right? It's a sieve. So assume the device is compromised, and then inversely, assume the network is compromised, right? And so like there was a study a year or two back that they came out with, and they said they found in the hundreds of what are called Stingray devices here in the DC metro area, which are essentially fake cell phone towers that will trick your phone into registering with them so they can duplicate all your traffic. So anything you're transmitting or storing on the edge device, if you're a organization, assume it's been compromised, right? If you're transmitting it to an edge device and storing it on an edge device, it probably has been intercepted. And with the upcoming of quantum, et cetera, it starts to get into the question of whether or not AES 256 is sufficient. But the other thing is that we are in a place today where employees, they simply demand a level of privacy. And they probably have the right to do that. In fact, it's a constitutional right, privacy, right? But just because I work for a company doesn't mean the company gets to know everything I do. And then when you think about that, from an employee's standpoint, they want to be able to have the flexibility to have their privacy. Well, a company doesn't want to inherit the liability of that lack of privacy either. What happens if your employee happens to go to a website that has malware on it? That malware, while the website that they went to wasn't associated with it, but that malware is associated with something like child porn. Do you organizationally now have the responsibility to launch an investigation into somebody that you had no constitutional right to have the information in the first place?
Right.
It gets into this really weird
Gray
place
area.
that the companies don't want to be in. Like in GDPR, they're specific about even moving data, people's personal data from one country to another. You have to have written permission of the edge user, right? And that's not going to get smaller. That's going to get bigger. So this is a very real problem that we all have to face.
If you could just give a high level, just what is Hypori? And then,
Sure.
if you don't mind, just taking out your phone and showing a day in the life of how this looks. 'Cause I think actually seeing how someone would operationalize this, and then we'll get to you, Matt, about deploying Hypori and how easy that is. So,
Well, and I love to focus on Hypori, but and it's because I think in some ways because we're a different approach to what everybody else has done out there, which is awesome. But I also want to talk to right, so what are the other options, right? A lot of the other options out there today, people would say is MDM, right? And the big packaging companies of the world, Microsoft and others, right? They would all have you believe, hey, this could be a part. We can do this for you too. And not attacking any one MDM vendor or another, but simply just the idea of MDM in itself. if they're telling you that they can make you CMMC compliant, or if they're telling you that they can make you compliant with all these different regulatory oversights, it's because they don't want you to actually go read the regulations. Because if you go and read them, like, look very clearly, the sanitization requirements for CUI would require that even if you deploy MDM on somebody's personal device, when they unenroll and they take CUI off that device, DoD regulations, federal regulations, NSA regulations all require that device has to be completely wiped and sanitized. There is no such thing as using MDM to delete data off of just a business container, and that's compliant with CUI sanitization. Those things don't exist. Go read the regulations yourself. If you don't believe me, Google it. You can go find it. Ask ChatGPT. It'll tell you. So, like, knowing yourself, you have a responsibility. If you're watching this, it's because you're in a cyberspace somewhere or something else like that, right? You have a responsibility to know the truth, right? And know what the actual facts say. Now, does that mean that you can go get an exception to policy from X umptifrats organization? You can try. There are organizations out there that do it. But should we be? Like, should we be getting exceptions to policy for policies that were put in place for the purpose of protecting national security information? Simply because we want to use vendor X, name the vendor, right? Or should we be all striving as cybersecurity professionals to work very hard at actually protecting data that the US government or the state and local governments have deemed as sensitive information sets, right? And I think that we have come to a time in which the government should not be bending to what the vendors want them to do. The vendors should be building to what the government needs. We, the vendors, have a responsibility to our nation, or to the idea of, it's just essentially against global data exploitation, criminal use of information sets, etc. We have a responsibility to protect end users, to protect corporations, to protect enterprises. And that's a big reason why we believe in what we're doing here at Hypori. I think Hypori is going to change the world, and I've said this a lot. I think it's going to change the world because I think it's going to change the way edge compute works, and that's because I don't care about this or yours or that one or that one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. iPad, tablet. I mean, great. Use them for your personal life the way that you want them. Pick which one you want to use and use it. Hypori enables you to get a fully secure access to an enterprise from any edge device, and all we do is stream pixels and encrypted pixels and write over them in real time to that edge device. So what that means is that I can give you the speed and power of cloud, because our operating system runs in cloud. So I can give you the speed and power of cloud processing, cloud storage, cloud RAM on any edge device with almost no footprint on the edge device and no footprint in transit. And so, I for instance, you want me to demo it, but I can just tell you,
Yeah.
I can go from my personal cell phone, and I can log into, I have 3 different phones on my personal cell phone, to include Department of Defense NIPRNet on my personal cell phone. We're the only platform out there that can do that, because it's complete physical isolation from these different environments.
Yep.
There is no overlap. There is no data in storage on this device that is from somebody else's corporate environment. Nothing comes to this device. I assume this device has already been compromised. That physical separation is critical. People keep saying, well, encryption is sufficient separation. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what the Chinese want you to continue to think. I mean, unless you're running like 1080, way over 256-bit encryption, and you don't believe that quantum's ever going to become a real thing, then sure, rest well. But in reality, the bad guy evolves as fast as technology does, right? And things like AI, things like the use of AI at a national level, even at a local level, it means that weaponized offensive capabilities that didn't exist at the local level now do. It's not hard to use, name the AI provider to create a mechanism in which to exploit something that before it required a group of highly skilled technical experts. Now it just requires somebody who's inventive with bad intent, right? And we as industry have to defend against that. So the idea of Hypori is not just defend the outside, but it's defending the inside. So it's defending the enterprise, defending the employee, defending the employee's privacy, separating the two from each other, reducing the cost of infrastructure, and giving you the power of cloud on the edge device. And that's why we think it's going to be revolutionary. Because imagine if you could walk down the street and your cell phone dies, and I say, hey, can I borrow your cell phone? and I log into Hypori, call the wife and say, hey, my battery died. I'm going to be here. You can call me here.
Yeah, and it's what he's talking about is it's as simple as downloading an application like Instagram, typing in your username, and you have access to what was on a dead phone now is on someone else's phone. And as soon as you're done, you just log out, delete the app, and you're good to go.
Use biometric multi-factor authentication, log into the operating system.
Yep.
You're there. You're interfacing with data. You're not in possession of data.
So all the compute is in the cloud,
100%.
which minimizes all the risk, or
Yep.
most of the risk on the edge.
Absolutely. You know, it's and it could be maybe it's in your corporate cloud, maybe it's in our SaaS environment, you know, but the idea is that data is somewhere in a protected enterprise. That's a managed protected enterprise. And it doesn't have to be this, right? The complexity of trying to manage, name which phone changes, how often, the iPhone 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 25, 30, the Android, you know, Samsung, you name it, right? That's cool. I want those things because I want cool cameras and I want cool features, and you should be able to use those things. But when it comes to interacting with your personal data, it doesn't have to be here.
Right.
So, in some real world customers that you have, is there resistance amongst employees and trust, or how do you get around that?
That's a great question. There's always resistance. I'd say the biggest resistance we have is the easy button. So, you know, Microsoft is a great example. Microsoft has done a wonderful job of bundling, and so they want to convince you that the easy button is use the bundle. Right, and we could solve all these problems with you. All you got to do is use the bundle, right? Grow the bundle. But realistically, nobody does everything well. Microsoft does some great things individually. Nobody does everything well. That's the reason why there's a lot of specialized technology companies out there that do very specific niche capability things, and they do them better than anybody else out there does. I would argue Hypori is one of them. There's a lot of other ones out there that I think would make the argument that they are as well, and justifiably so. So we run into a challenge when it comes to big enterprises that have embraced big enterprise bundled platforms that they kind of go, oh, we have to introduce something other than name the brand. So that's a challenge for us. Another one for us is you know, users just believing what we're saying, right? You know, saying, hey, you guys say you're not going to invade my privacy, but how do I believe you? And you know, I mean, I'd welcome the audience, you know, reach out to me and tell me if you have a better idea than what we have. But you know, we've gone through and done our healthcare side of the house. We've done all these different red teams and everything else like that to prove that we protect the edge device. That doesn't necessarily demonstrate that I've been able to prove that I can protect your privacy. But I can tell you that when you deploy Hypori, you're only going to allow it to have access to your accelerometer, your GPS, your camera, if you want to use your camera for like Teams and that kind of thing, and voice. If you could turn all that stuff off if you just want to interact with data and you don't want to give it anything else, but you know, the access that's required on the edge device is relatively minimal. But the idea that any of your data ever comes off of that device is something that, you know, I would love to be able to demonstrate if there is an organizational or national certification for privacy protection out there that we're not aware of. I'd love to run us through it. Because on the defense side of the house, I think we've been through, we were talking about earlier, I think we've been through like 14 different red teams. You name the intelligence agency, you name the Department of Defense agency. We had Threat Systems Management Office run against us multiple times. DISA's run against us. DOD's run against us. Army's run against us. The debrief to the Department of Defense CIO was we were the most secure mobile operating system or mobile application ever tested to date. We are the only ones to this day that are still operating with blanket authorization for BYOD in the Department of Defense. And now, you know, we're going outside of the DoD, right? We're going into the rest of healthcare. We're going the rest of federal. DHA uses us. Banking is using us. We just had a great recent investor who I don't think I can talk about quite yet, but it will come out here in the next few days. But we have one of the really big banks in the world has invested in us, not just because they see that we solve their BYOD problem, but we also solve the GDPR international privacy problems as well. So I think this is the beginning of a new way to look at edge devices.
Yep.
I will share. So my wife gave me one of the great epiphanies that it came to that shaped the direction of where this product is coming, right? And she'll hate that I'm using her as a reference for this, but so she came to me and said one day, hey, when can I have Hypori? I was like, why in the world would you want Hypori, right? We're this enterprise
We'll give
protection
her, we'll give her a
platform.
quote if she wants.
Yeah, but but what she said was an epiphany for us as a product is that maybe this actually leads to where our B2C offering eventually becomes, right? But her epiphany was like, look, I'm tired of worrying about losing this thing.
Right.
I'm tired of worrying about if I left it behind or if somebody stole it from me or anything else like that. And she's like, hey, look, why can't I change this the way I change my purses? Why can't I carry the big one with the camera when I go watch the kids? Why can't I carry the little one when I want to go out with my girlfriends to have dinner? Why can't this become an accessory rather than a critical life accessory that I can't afford to lose? And we were like, wow,
Yeah.
actually, we could make that happen,
Right.
right? We can make it so that the idea of mobility isn't the physical device you possess. It's the fact that you can be mobile and access it from anything.
Anywhere.
No, I
That's-
think the pedigree that you've deployed in the most intense security environments in the DoD, in Europe as well, really for state and local organizations, there's a lot of use cases, proof points that this is a secure way to deploy zero trust mobility. And then, Jared, in terms of complexity of deployment, does this need a large team? Just you train a few people up. So I say, yeah, this is something we need. I could have one device for all my employees. We're seeing a lot of this need in the corrections area and public safety as
Yeah.
well of device management. What kind of expertise would they need to get the?
Almost, I mean, for us, especially if you're buying from our federal certified or our SaaS-based platform, almost nothing. It becomes with coordination of user lists, integration from whatever your user enterprise system is today, say Active Directory or others, and then from a deployment standpoint, it's simply deploy the MFA, send a QR code, you download the software, you authenticate your MFA, you authenticate the software, you're in. It's done. So Hypori is very fast to deploy. In fact, we recently just migrated almost 40,000 users in the Army from one entire separate cloud to another entire separate cloud, and we did it in 2 weeks.
Wow.
So it's 40,000 users is a ton, obviously.
That's huge.
It's huge. Now, of course, there's always user training challenges. There's getting users to actually accept and interact and answer emails, and those are always those kind of challenges. But the speed of being able to deploy something like Hypori is really easy because it's a SaaS platform, right? It's an as a service platform or a PaaS platform if you want to run it on your own cloud, but you want us to run it as a service for you. I think to Michael's earlier point, the SLED complexity, which is huge. If you're a CISO and a SLED in an organization, I think you have to start with what am I, from a regulatory standpoint, what do I have to be compliant with, right? And then second is, and everybody else, everybody wants to go into you can argue budget's the next thing and everything else like that. But what we've seen, even when you think security is number one, user experience has got to be one of the top ones as well. Because if your system is super secure, but it sucks to use, users just won't use it. They will find, they call it shadow IT, right? They'll find ways around it. They'll use WhatsApp, they'll use Signal, they'll use whatever they have to do. So for technology companies, we have this challenge in front of us to create an intuitive, flowing user environment that is easy to use, that is also secure, and then economically feasible, right? From a budgetary standpoint, because like they said, for SLED, name the small agency, whatever that happens to be, sanitary agency, transportation organization, law enforcement organization, sheriff's department. How do you enable that kind of a thing? And when you look at the complexities of them, they're all very different from each other. A sheriff's department, especially if you're on close to the border, CBP type, San Diego, Texas, Arizona, the cartels have almost nation state level cyber capabilities, right? So you need to be defending against that, but you're also operating in remote environments. Whereas if you're the Department of Transportation in New York City, you're in a hyper-dense city environment, but you have the complexity of tons of employees and contractors, right? So you don't want to buy every new contractor a new cell phone. So what's the fastest way to bring a contractor in and let a contractor go, or let a contractor depart? Well, it would be by virtually issuing them a piece of infrastructure that you can instantly revoke. So we're seeing a lot of that, especially in the healthcare side of the house, because healthcare has become very predominant in its deployment of contractors. They're bringing in
Yes.
mid-tier healthcare providers, i.e., like PAs and nurses. They come in for 90 days or 120 days, and then they move on and go do something else. Well,
Travelers, yeah.
how do you let them? How do you let them be a part of your healthcare infrastructure while you're still protecting PHI, PII, and sensitive healthcare information sets? But you don't want to have to buy each one of them a laptop.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think you started, it's a paradigm shift, but that shift has to happen. The way we're doing things today is just not scalable. It's not feasible. It just won't.
Sure.
It'll collapse under its own weight. So, the thinking about, and, the analogy you gave with your wife asked, that this is just basically a display device, right? Back to, I'm just thinking about it. You watch Netflix downstairs, you go upstairs and watch the end of the movie. It's a display device.
Right.
All the compute, all the risk is
Somewhere else.
somewhere else.
It's
And
funny you use the Netflix thing. We actually talked about like maybe there will be a point probably where we actually go and start deploying into like TV application stores. Like you go to your Samsung and launch Hypori, and all of a sudden now you have a PC that's running on cloud-based
Right.
speeds from your TV, and you didn't need to bring anything with you, right?
Yeah.
So
all secure,
Yep.
all separate,
No
satis-
latency, really. It's
satisfying
Perfect.
privacy requirements, cost
Risk,
savings. Are you seeing, organizations? What do you think the adoption of this is going to be over the next 2 or 3 years? Do you see it? Obviously we're seeing a lot in Fed, which is great. You think SLED and healthcare are sort of the next?
I think finance is going to be one of the big ones. If you look at, for us from an expansion standpoint, adoption standpoint for virtualization, like who I empathize with definitely is like the VMwares of the world. When VMware very first came out, I remember I was an Active Directory guy, and they came out and said, hey, you don't have to buy physical servers for every one of your servers. You can virtualize these. And I was like, BS. Like that's not true. That can't be true, right? Now you look at it, you can't touch a data center that's not virtualized in some way, shape, or form, right? So there's an adoption challenge to getting people to understand. It's a user education side of the house that we have to get people to understand the feature is even out there, the capability is even out there. I often run into CISOs all the time who they know darn well all the challenges that are out there from a technical standpoint, but then when I tell them what we do, they go, oh, I didn't even know that existed. Right. And so we have to find ways to break through that from an just to get people to know what we are. Early on, Gartner told us, and I didn't understand the joke at the time. I do understand the joke now. Gartner was like, hey, we have really good news for you. And I said, okay, what's that? And they said, well, you actually are your own product category. There is nobody in the virtual mobile space. You are it. That's awesome. Okay, cool. And they said, well, and we have bad news for you. And I said, okay, well, what's that? And they said, you're also your own product category. And I didn't get the sense of humor of that at the time. I really have now. And we talk about it internally in the company, and we're talking about it with other companies, et cetera. It's like, it's not like I'm Chevy selling against Ford, right? I'm not trying to convince you why my pickup truck's features are better than your pickup truck's features.
Well, you're 3 devices
Well,
against
I'm
carrying
more like,
one.
I'm more like Tesla is trying to sell
Yeah.
against Ford.
Right.
Right? When it comes to, hey, yeah, it looks kind of like a truck. It has 4 wheels and 4 doors, but that's about where the similarities end. And that's what we're trying to say is like, yeah, okay, you think it's a mobile device. You think it's a mobile pad, iPad, or a phone or something else like that, but it's really not. It is something inside of the cloud. And I think we're just at a point now where people actually understand what cloud is. When you look at the strength of cloud is elastic compute. Right, the ability to spin up processors and turn down processors and spin up RAM and turn down RAM and have access to high-speed backbone. Well, man, what is the one thing that we carry with us every day that I only use for incremental periods of time and then I put away? This thing.
Right.
I guess with another question, I have is if I'm a customer and I want to get started, does Hypori have a trial? Proof of values, how would I engage with Hypori to get going?
Definitely. I mean, reach out. Yeah, I think there was an email address earlier on the slide up front, which is I believe hypori@carasoft.com. You can reach out to hypori.com. You can go to our website. You can request a trial. Depending on what the opportunity is, depending on what your vision is on how you want to scale it, our team will work with you on setting up a pilot so that you can actually test and evaluate it. There's a lot of different ways that you can see what it does. I think one of the first things to do is have an actual kind of conversation about what you're trying to accomplish. and then show it to you. Often we have people who have bad expectations, who come. So like for instance, the healthcare industry, because they're regulated by HIPAA. They were like, oh yeah, you got make a ton of sense to use you guys. Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna put you in an ER with ICU nurses. Wait, no, that's not where you want to use us, right? Because there is some level of latency of getting access to the data. You got to authenticate, you got to log in, et cetera, right? Where you want to put us in is your traveling nurse checking on grandma so and so, or you want to put us in remote clinic X that you don't want to deploy an entire infrastructure to, and instead you could do this instead to give them access to healthcare records and medical records. So helping your organization both understand what their challenge is and then how we would fit into that, because like I was saying earlier, there is no one vendor that does everything.
Right.
There's a lot of deployments we have out there. Like, I appreciate Michael being here. Like, there's a lot of vendors that we have come out there that say, hey, we want to get to this whole problem. And I can say, well, I can solve these 3 parts of the problem. We have other partners like I67 who can solve 2 more parts of that problem. And then there's probably 4 other parts that we have to go figure out who the right vendor ecosystem is to solve the entire problem.
DLP, data loss prevention.
Data backups. Like for instance, we sometimes partner with like Zscaler, for instance. So how are you actually peering data on the back end from point to point, right? How are you protecting that? There's all different mechanisms of, and if you really go out and read Zero Trust and look at how you do it, MFA, identity management. All these things come into play, right? And we only solve one part of that problem, but we solve a huge part of the problem. In fact, I feel like we solve probably one of the largest unaddressed problems that are out there. There's a lot of great other technologies.
100%. So, all right, thank you.
Welcome to Hypori, your separate, secure, 100% private corporate workspace you can access from any device. For example, this is my personal smartphone. I have no corporate data or enterprise apps on my phone. Further, I don't want my company snooping on my private data by requiring me to add their mobile device management software to my device. Thankfully, none of that is necessary. By simply downloading the Hypori client from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, I can gain secure access to my corporate workspace. This is my corporate calendar. I have Microsoft Teams, where I can have private conversations with my coworkers. I can have other apps installed that are required to do my day job. And of course, everybody's favorite application, email. Hypori is cloud-based and zero trust, so no data from the corporate workspace is ever resident on the physical device. The image you see is transmitted from the cloud to the phone via compressed, encrypted pixel stream. No data is ever delivered to the phone. Your data remains secure in the cloud because it never leaves the cloud. And when you exit your corporate workspace, you are back to your personal device where none of your corporate data lives, and you can access your personal data privately. If you're interested or want to learn more, reach out to us at info@hypori.com or visit us on the web at www.hypori.com.
I just want to thank Jared, Matt, Stephen for being with us this afternoon. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us today. We hope this webinar has been helpful for you and your organization. If you have further questions or would like to get more information, please feel free to contact us via the information on the contact slide. Thanks again and have a great day.